All right, we're back with Harrowings in the Passing show. A little bit of who, what, when, and where on my way in to take an impromptu shift at Daily Provisions. It'll be about 10:30, yeah, roughly, until 3. Better than nothing. They're short-staffed and have been for 4 hours. Sorry to say. That's the way it goes sometimes. I'm going to cross over here, 19-second crossing. You see the work going on in the neighborhood, ongoing documentation of a primary sort for historians of the future. Who, what, when, and where. Every human being has similar potential if they've got brain cells, upright posture, the ability to read. It's very helpful. It's all part of a piece. History unfolding. Think a lot about Hegel in the spirit of history. From the time of the Industrial Revolution that was underway during Hegel's lifetime through the present moment, we've had the thinkers amongst us considering the course of human history in the rearview mirror. I often feel like it's driving with my eyes closed. And we've got Heidi, Blake, and Bruno Bettati. Hey, Bruno, you want to go live? I'd be happy to have you along for the ride. You've done it before. Mickey's here. Arizona, Mickey? Is that right? Anyway, let me know. Just write it into the chat. Hello, Bruno. I understand you're going live tomorrow with our mutual friend, the Everyday Junglist, if I'm not mistaken. And Mickey out in Arizona. Yep. Bruno in Italy. I forget exactly where you are in Italy, but um, it's always good to be able to show what's happening here in Washington, D.C. to all of y'all coming and going. If you followed Connecticut Avenue all the way down, you'd run into the White House into Lafayette Square, the monument to Baron von Steuben. Today, yeah, well, I could go live just right now. You're 100 kilometers north of Rome. Yeah, you can go live. Okay, let's invite you. Just for a minute or two, because I've got to go to work. And I'll be on for a while. Let's see, where's the invite? I just hit you like that, and then go like that. And we're waiting for you to join. We had Charlotte Del Signore earlier, who's my coach, my career coach. And what I ended up doing is working at Daily Provisions. So, I don't know. Hi, Bruno.
Good
So
afternoon.
let me let you introduce yourself to everybody on the passing show here. Who are
Me?
you?
Well, me, I am, what am I? A writer. I am a writer.
Yeah, and you're
What else
more
do
than
you want
that.
me to say? Yeah, I am the Phoenix bird. I have reinvented myself many times.
I love that. I've reinvented myself a few times too, as you may already know.
It's like a required characteristics for the times we live.
I think so. It's a good skill to have.
It
So
is a very good skill. Yes, I agree. It's just gotten a little bit more difficult now. It used to be easier to reinvent yourself before.
that is true. I mean, I moved to Denmark and became a web software technical writer with really no experience in it, just the belief that I could do it. And
Okay,
that
well,
was
since
fun.
since we have since I don't know how to turn the camera, but okay, this is where I live in front of this tower in the Italian countryside.
Oh, lovely. Look at that.
Yeah, it's a very little village, and I live in the castle that is above of the village.
And you had lived in Chile, right, before?
Yes, I am half Chilean, half Italian. I lived in Chile for a period, and I also lived in Berlin for a period.
Berlin.
Yes.
I love Berlin. I have only been there briefly when I was coming out of the Goethe Institute down in
Ugh.
Bavaria. I went up to
I
Berlin to
I
stay
went.
with a friend. Go ahead.
I went through COVID in Germany, so it was quite a challenge.
I'm sure. So, you are also, is it right that the Everyday Junglist told me you were a filmmaker as well at some point?
Yes, I was a film producer for 20 years, and I made 20 feature films, like one per
20
year.
feet, 20 feature films. That's fantastic. One per year, like Woody Allen. What kind of feature
Yeah,
films were they?
yeah,
Tell
nice
me about your favorite or most famous film.
that I made.
Yeah.
Competing with you Americans is impossible. So anything that we would do would never be famous or recognized. But my films were in film festivals, in
Okay.
Cannes, in Sundance, and things like that. So I had two films in Sundance in competition. And the second one I had is called The Future, Il Futuro.
El
And
Futuro.
it is based on a book by a very famous Chilean writer called Roberto Bolaño, and it is a film about immigration, and it is also about the future of Europe. And it was a very complicated film to do, because we shot in Köln in Germany, and we shot in Chile, and we shot in Rome. So it was a very complex four country co-production, and I was very satisfied with the result. But it was a very complicated film to do. So that would be a good pick, Il Futuro, which I think is currently available in some platforms in the United States. It got distribution in the States. This is why I mentioned it.
Well, that's great. I want to look at that because I want to see what the future holds. I'm convinced we're creating it.
Yeah, I know. You have this this
Vision,
this belief.
this delusion. Yes. I don't know. I don't know if I'm delusional or not, but you can see here on the street the architecture around me. Most of it built at a time when everybody who was there then is gone now. I think about that a lot, the brief nature of life and how those who have gone before, creating this world I'm walking through, are no longer here, but they were my ancestors, so to speak. And I'd like to be a good ancestor if I can be for the generations coming after. So I have that belief. What else do I want to talk to you about? Um, well, how we met. Was it the first time you met us when Dan and I were on together going to the airport? Was that the
Yeah,
first time?
yeah. You you love to come back to the story. Yeah, it's when you were walking around Dulles Airport, and I said, "Why is this guy walking around an airport?"
No good reason, actually, just because I thought it was interesting to see all the people who were coming together and going apart, probably the closest they would ever get to each other, and kind of oblivious to each other. And they're all going different places on the globe. And there's this kind of like, it's like a train station too, or I don't know. You probably, being a filmmaker, you're probably familiar with things like Wings of Desire, right?
Yeah, of
Or
course.
Himmel über Berlin, you
Yeah,
know?
of
I
course.
think of I think
The
of
Bender.
myself in those terms, being like this flaneur, this guy just walking along, picking up little vibes of what's going on and reporting out on it kind of benignly without any real judgment. Just saying,
Um,
well, there it is.
it is a very important film, I would say, in the history of cinema, and it's probably one of the best by Wenders. And yeah, there is this reflection about roaming around life with your thoughts and yourself, but also surrounded by angels that are sort of trying to push you in the right direction.
Yeah, and then pushing themselves into life because they get so frustrated.
Yeah, they get so frustrated that in the end they say, "Okay, let's try life."
Let's go out there and live a life. Yeah, and he falls in love with the trapeze artist. I love that part, and just the lives that those people actually led. I've watched some documentaries on the making of it and of the sequel. Did you see the sequel? Far
Yes,
Away,
and I
So
saw the,
Close.
I saw the sequel, and I saw the documentary also. Yes.
It was kind of unsatisfying, I thought, the sequel in some ways, particularly the ending. It was a little contrived, sort of lost the thread, I felt. But
You mean Far Away So Close?
yeah, that one. What did you think?
No, I thought it was quite a good idea, but that those films are on the period in which Wenders was in his peak of international co-production, and he was doing very complicated films. So the first thing I would point out is that they were very difficult films to make, and he actually made that one, Far Away So Close, and he immediately did Until the End of the World, which is also an incredible 11 country co-production with shootings in 12 different countries, and
Amazing.
they all point to your same subject, which is roaming around the world and thinking about the future. How do we build the future together if we're together?
Right. I think that's a big if. The divisions between people. But when I get to, going back to the fact I was in Berlin because I've been in the Goethe Institute to get my German skills up to snuff because I was going back to graduate school and I was going to be teaching German at the University of Pittsburgh the following semester. I was thrown in with a whole bunch of people from around the world in 1994 when the Yugoslavia had just broken up. And a lot of these people were young folks who were going into their diplomatic services from Macedonia, from Croatia, from other countries, Romania, etc. So that was very exciting for me because I realized what common ground we all had. Our common ground was we were all trying to learn the German language together on the shores of the Chiemsee down in southern Bavaria. Have you ever been down there?
Yes, I have
See,
recently.
so you've got a picture of what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah, I speak German, and I lived for 3 years in Germany, so yeah, I do
in
get an idea.
Berlin. Yeah. Where in Berlin were you exactly? What area?
I lived in downtown in Kreuzköln, which would be the midpoint between Kreuzberg and Neukölln.
Okay.
And then I moved out of the city. I went into East Berlin, and I lived in an area, Chemnitz. It's like 10 kilometers out of downtown. It was a little bit far away, and
Huh,
but I found a very nice place to live, a studio.
interesting. When I went there, I didn't have a cell phone, and I just basically had to home in on the building where my friends were staying in this diplomatic school on the eastern side, Friedrichsgracht. And
Friedrichstraße, yeah,
so
downtown.
I
So
just had
that's
to stay
that's
out there until I saw one of them.
Friedrichstraße is Mitte, which is the middle.
Right, right. And well, I didn't stay long, but I was just there to like sleep overnight, or maybe 2 nights, I forget. And then we went to a Croatian church service to look for my friend's relatives who had been supposedly gone to Berlin, but he had lost track of them. And yeah, just really dramatic stuff that everyone was going through. And being connected, at the human level, that was something I think we all need more of. Get to know these guys working on the overpass here. We're going to have a walking area soon, pedestrian zone. There's pictures of what it's going to look like right here, where the
Yeah.
road goes under DuPont Circle. Have you been to Washington D.C. before?
No, I haven't been. I have been to the states. I know like 10 different states, but I haven't been to Washington. No.
Well, if you ever come, I'll show you around.
If they
And
ever let me, if they ever let me in, you mean?
if they got any reason we shouldn't let you in,
I mean, if they Googled me, I write a lot of articles about American politics.
good for you. There's the National
Yeah.
Guardsmen over here under the trees, keeping us
What
safe. That's
you know
been a
your your,
real.
your little story about Berlin
Uh huh.
and Wings of Desire and all that
Yeah.
reminds me also of my period in Europe at that time. And I'm currently writing a novel, a Bildungsroman, which is a
Excellent.
it's a, it's a it's a novel about somebody growing up. Okay,
Right.
which is a young hitchhiker who hitchhikes around Europe, and he hitchhikes around Europe in '96. And '96 is an important year because it's the year that the therapy for HIV is discovered, and it is also the year in which everyone begins to get an email and get into internet.
Correct. 94 for me, but 96 was when I built my first website.
It's the year of installation of internet, and this '96 is only, I don't know, 30, 31 years ago. But at that time, meeting people, talking to people, even though if you didn't know the language, and hitchhiking and traveling around was super easy, and people were open to talk to you and find out about you, where you came from, what you did, and all that. There was curiosity, and there was no fear. And travelers were looked upon as the old bards of the medieval times. We would bring entertainment and information, and so the trip was actually very satisfying. But just a couple of years later, just 10 years later, when people began having cell phones and internet and all that, now today hitchhiking is impossible and nobody's interested about you because they can find the information on the cell phone.
Aha. That's very interesting. Yeah.
So the novel is interesting because it is 96, but it describes a world that feels like 2 centuries ago, not 30 years ago. The change in which we have now, the way in which we behave with each other, the openness and the respect and the empathy that we use with each other has changed so much in such a short amount of time. And I really miss that period because as Naomi Klein would say, at that period we all wanted to be international, whereas today we're all sort of obsessed with being national, and
Mm.
the war between nationalism and internationalism is so central now.
Yes, I think I understand that pretty well. I don't know if you know a lot of my story, but '96 I built my first website, and I was staying in Pittsburgh that summer, looking after my Italian girlfriend's stuff, which was packed into my apartment. And then, when she came back, we went on a little trip together. But in '99, I found somebody else eventually. I had a few more relationships to experiment with in Pittsburgh. Being in the university, I had a lot of international people around. I was briefly engaged to a girl from Ecuador. And then um, I ended up striking up a conversation during that time on 6degrees.com, which was not a dating site, but rather very early social networking. And 6 degrees, meaning 6 degrees of separation, right? I know somebody that you know that you know. Anyway, so
Yeah.
you could use that like a Java app to surf your connections. And I ended up getting in a conversation with the manager of the Danish National Ensemble, Atlas, it's called, still going, does modern Danish classical stuff. And she decided it was important that we meet and invited me to join her on a vacation in Bangkok, which I did not do. But I said, I'll come over and visit you, though, in Denmark sometime. And she said, well, if you'll do that, I'll come over first and visit you in America. I've got some relatives over there. So if things go south, I can flee. And she did. And I saw nothing wrong with her. And I got myself a job in Denmark that I mentioned earlier. And I went over there. The relationship crashed and burned in a month and a half. And I haven't seen her since. But I had a job in Denmark for a couple of years. I got to be international, like you're saying. I got to go down to CeBIT 2001 and be a corporate spy for my company in Hanover, Germany.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I had all
All
that
all
opportunity.
that
Go ahead.
everything that Jung would call synchronicity was so much more factible. Like you would meet somebody, and an opportunity would immediately open, be it a visit or a job or a
Right.
friendship. And for some reason, that which flowed, it flowed like a river in the 90s. Now it is totally contained. Everyone is suspicious of everyone. Nobody's really curious about anyone, and opportunities and synchronicity doesn't happen as it used to happen. And this is something I
Hmm.
am very nostalgic about.
I find Substack to be like the early internet, though, where you and I are having that international conversation. Dan and I have had that international conversation. And we can see that maybe we can be the change we want to see and bring that back like a subterfuge, what is the word, subversion of it, of the overall trend of shrinking and become expansive again. What do you
Well,
think?
to that point, I have a theory about that, which is basically, and it's not mine, but it's not mine. But basically, I divide even people that I meet on the internet. I divide people in two: people that are interested in the truth, and people that are interested in momentum, in pushing things and making things happen. So people that are interested in momentum, they want to know if you are pro or against Trump, pro or against Ukraine, pro or against the vaccines. And depending on your answer, they will push you with them or they will push you away from them, away from you. And so I am not really interested in momentum. I am interested in truth. I am interested in arguing, in discussing, in talking, in finding out what do we have in common, not what do we want to push forward. And so
I'm
in that
inspired by
aspect,
that.
hmm?
I'm inspired by that. Yes, I agree. And what I see is primates,
Private.
traumatized primates
Oh yeah,
from the get go. From the point of being born with our huge heads, we inflict trauma on each other. And we need to own that and also recognize, oh, yeah, I am also a version of you. Does that make sense?
of
Resonate?
course, of course. It shows that you're an internationalist, and it shows that you regulate empathy correctly. Because the problem of empathy is central to this aspect, because empathy is something that needs to be regulated. You can't be totally empathic because then you become naive and people exploit you and take advantage of you. But also
Yes, they do.
you can't be totally close to empathy because then you become a psychopath and then you desire nothing for the other one. So
Yeah.
empathy is a very peculiar thing. It's not a capacity. I don't agree with Elon Musk that empathy is the main problem of the West. Empathy is a faculty of the brain, and we have it. We just have to learn how to use it. And curiously enough, the more I watch it's funny that you say the primate because it sounds like the animals are inferior. And to my point of view, animals regulate empathy much better than we do.
Well, they stay in harmony with their environment, and that's another thing I'm really hot on is leveraging our technology to enable the greatest benefit for all life, from the microbes and phages that Dan studies to, us and beyond. There's so many different species on the planet. We are such a brief flash in geological time, and our lifespans are even briefer. So we are time binders, though. So I think a lot about Korzybski and time binding. If you're familiar with that concept, and Korzybski, who was, an inspirer of Robert Anton Wilson,
Aha, yes.
and Robert Anton Wilson sort of nails it, left, right, and center for me, along with Terence McKenna, who I was talking to Sue Cawthorn about over in England not too long back. Um, and we've got these minds. We've been shown the way by some of our visionaries. And if we can get all of us to wake up and be aware, and that's where Gurdjieff comes in for me. You remember G.I. Gurdjieff and the Fourth Way?
Yes, yes, of course, yes.
Yeah. Yes, of course. In your case, yes, of course. But how many people around us in this place, if you were to survey them, have ever heard of the Fourth Way or know anything about it? Maybe a lot, but I doubt it. And we're living our lives in a robotic state, sort of unaware, unawake, and while the angels might be observing us and like in Far Away So Close or Wings of Desire, it's up to us to take actions. And the actions are all that matter. It isn't what we believe or think or feel, it's what we do and what we don't do and the impacts of what we do. I think about that a lot, about the harm I've created by choices I make when I go to the grocery store, versus going to the market that I sometimes walk through here and buying local and all the supply chain impacts. That's one of the reasons I'm working at Daily Provisions. I want to study my own company and how it's, the eggs, where are they coming from? You know, um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course,
how are the chickens' lives?
origin denomination and also food chain tracking.
All that. And we've got the technology to really get a handle on it sooner
Well,
rather than later.
you
Anyway,
know,
go ahead.
are we finishing?
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I
I'm
am.
talking now.
What I'm two different comments. One is that now I am working. I'm working on writing, but I am also working in bees. I'm working in honey,
Oh, good.
and I'm learning the craft, and I'm learning how to build the boxes, how to feed the bees, and how to extract the honey just in case, because I think it's very important that we all learn how to. I think it's very important that we all learn how to create at least one food product. You can go for tomatoes, and I'll go for honey, and some other guy will go for some other thing. That is going to be a very useful skill in the near future.
I've got some herbs. Yeah, farming, it's really an important one. I got in contact with the woman who did the free kitchen in Woodstock back in 1969, and she's very much an advocate of us all gardening. So I've had her interviewed on my Harrowings podcast a while back. I should probably have her back again. She's in her 80s now. But she's also, you talked about how we limit ourselves by, when we line up politically. She's very much a supporter of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And, that's anathema to a lot of people. I actually could
Well,
find and have seen up close and personal this guy. So,
this is my other point, which is
yeah,
for some reason since the 80s we have been at war with academy, with institutions, and with books
right,
in general.
right.
People have stopped reading since the 80s and then the 90s and etc.
Ah, right.
And AI now is basically justifying that you don't need to read a book anymore, which I find terrible because
Yes.
it's very different to read a book by Robert Anton Wilson than to ask AI, tell me about Robert Anton Wilson. The experience is completely different. He's a poet. And unfortunately, in the States, I mean, Ron DeSantis really started a war against books even before Trump, and especially
Yes.
since you started with this thing about woke, which is, woke is not a subject here in Europe. It's a very American thing that you people
Yes.
lose a lot of time quarreling about. And very recently, now in Substack, I found an author who describes himself as a scientist that had to become a journalist of science. He had to go into divulgation, basically because he thinks that it's very important to restudy the origin of COVID. Like how did COVID happen, and how did the scientific community reacted to it, and then how the political community reacted to it, and how basically COVID has been weaponized. And his historical study is very interesting because COVID started in northern Italy in January 2020, 5 years,
Right.
6 years ago, and then all the story with the Wuhan lab in China, and suddenly we were all convinced that COVID was man-made and was a bioweapon manufactured by the Chinese, and then Trump started speaking against the Chinese and all that. And
Right.
basically, the historical investigation basically situates how COVID was discovered, what was the first reaction, what was the role of Anthony Fauci and all that. And it's very interesting to study it, because things are not black and white. And in the end, the historical study proves that it is simply a mutation of another virus. Nobody caused it. It is not something that escaped from a Chinese lab. But you got to understand why we got convinced that. How did it get to be the official narrative? And basically, this is the problem. Do you argue and investigate so that you find the correct narrative, or do you go for momentum and you just jump on the first boat that carries the biggest momentum, be it Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his anti-vaxxing policy, or be it Trump against the Chinese, or be the AI race, and all that. There's a problem with perception and narrative today. And I would say the only way to fix it, for the moment, the only way to fix it is to read books instead of asking AI.
That's correct. And also to have conversations with each other in which we wake each other up in a positive way, not in a woke way necessarily or an unwoke way. I try to stay out of that kind of mix myself, but when you stay out of it, you're also erring on the side of apathy. And apathy is worse, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that's a lot of what people are overwhelmed in their nervous systems. So they shut down and they don't engage and they just are letting the train go down the tracks toward the inevitable. I don't want to see the whole thing go over the edge, but in a lot of ways, I'm also sitting here in Washington, D.C., so I can have an eye up close on the geopolitical scenario. We just had Netanyahu in town. Couldn't drive my wife to work the right way because he was over there talking to Trump. And I don't know. This is just weird to me to be so close to it all. And like I said, I haven't talked to him, but I've seen Robert F. Kennedy Jr. up close and personal. I know where he lives. Um, and I know a lot of people who are interfaced with him a lot. I don't know. It's
I
they
don't
all
o-
put
I
their
don't
pants on one leg at a time, but there's this issue of people view money. as being so important. I've noticed, for instance, in some of my friends who are less famous, that they get a certain degree of cachet out of people believing that they're well off financially. I could give a crap, but apparently people really do. That really affects how they view others. And I wish we could get away from that. I've got to get into work actually now because they are short staffed today. So that's where I was heading when we started up. But I really do appreciate the time and the conversation because I think we covered a lot of useful ground. In fact, it's going to be transcripted on YouTube. So maybe we can cull it for writing a book about it. Somebody actually wanted to do that. My friend Gabriella is from Hungary originally. I think she's out in the West Coast now. But she wanted to write a book based on our conversations about transformative conversations or something. I begged off. I don't think there are enough books. I don't need to add to the pile.
Uh, well,
So
we'll have to continue talking about it. I agree that
I'd love to.
sometimes, if the conversation is about argument and about information and about trying to look what makes us closer to the other person, what is
Right.
it that we share, that rather than what divides us, then the conversation goes somewhere. But if one of us jumps into the momentum of anything, then the conversation goes into rage bait, clickbait, and anger, and
You're right.
time is money, and I don't have enough money, and
That's
therefore
the
I don't have
American
enough time for this
revelation.
conversation.
That's the American revelation. Time is money. I have a cartoon to that effect somewhere.
Well, time is not money.
Time is the absence of money, so says Emmett Fletstein. And Far Away So Close,
Time is
Willem
the absence
Dafoe's
of money,
character.
and there's two ways to look at time. Time as a count, as a number, but also time as an opportunity, as a coincidence. And there's two different perceptions of time all the time.
One thing we have here is an independent bookstore, which I want to advocate. I'm going to walk by that before we close off. And we have a Chinese bookstore as well. That's kind of important. And they have a lot of talks here of Chinese Americans, Chinese authors at JF Books. I'm coming right up on it now. Can you see it?
Yes,
Yeah, made in Taiwan. So
bookstores and libraries are becoming the new churches. I would say they're really the only safe spaces left, and you can find very good conversation in bookstores and libraries.
So these are all already have happened. It looks like Friday 7/24 is the next one. But up there, they had a house across the strait, two sisters in a divided memory, and then from Red China to Blue Maryland, the political awakening of an immigrant community. Who took my wallet, resilience money, and starting over in a new land. So yeah, that's a kind of an important bookstore. Then this is Kramer Books, and they're trying to program me. I'm pretty sure with the books they have up there in the window. But I don't mind. I need to be programmed a bit.
Well,
I love to
the way
survey.
the way I am using Substack is like a bookstore, which is instead of subscribing to people, what I do is that when I find somebody in
Right,
Substack that has a book, I buy the book. And
right.
I
Do
get the
that.
book, I buy the book, and I get the book over here in Italy, and I read it, and then I write to the guy, and I gave him my opinion, and I talk to the guy or girl about
Conversation.
his or her book, and immediately the conversation starts on the right foot.
Excellent. I love that. And keep doing it. And subscribe to people too is what I do. Is I try to give them a little nudge by being a subscriber on an annual basis. Usually, it saves me a little bit of money over the monthly. So it's all that kind of thing. Oh, there's my friend Rick. I was talking to Rick earlier today. He's in the blue shirt over on the corner there in the sun. I think he's talking with Janine. So it's nice to know people too, up front and personal. Get to know your neighbors. And with that, I'm going to wrap it. Thanks so much, Bruno. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Thank you for the
Maybe in a more
invitation.
scheduled.
I will be live in 2 more hours with Everyday Junglist to continue talking.
Okay, 2 hours.
We're gonna talk about politics and astrology today.
Okay, I thought that was on Thursday. Okay,
No,
very good.
it's today in 2 more hours.
Very good. Glad to hear it. I may be on later with you guys on Friday. I think he's thinking of doing a. If it's Thursday, that'd be even better. But tomorrow, that is, that we could do the trio thing again. I'll let you go. Out here.
Okay, I'm available. See you.
Bye.
Bye.